I think that public grieving is, it can be uncomfortable, but also there's something about it that's where you're more connected because you're kind of walking around and everyone.
What does it really mean to grow up in the shadow of Elvis Presley? For his granddaughter Riley Keough, the family legacy was far more complicated than the public ever knew, filled with secrets, silence, and conflicting stories that shaped her childhood.
Lisa Marie Presley to publish her memoir. Eva Pilgrim is here with that. So Lisa Marie, that she recorded as she completed that memoir, saying it felt like she was with her, hearing her voice.
Now, at 36, Riley is finally opening up about the reality behind one of history's most famous families. Why did she wait so long to speak? Her revelations expose the emotional cost of fame, loyalty, love, and the family secrets hidden behind the Presley name, childhood surrounded by contradictions. From a young age, Riley Keough's world was filled with conflicting stories about her grandfather's fate. Officially, Elvis Presley died suddenly on August 16, 1977, from a cardiac arrhythmia in his home. This was the story repeated over and over, shared with visitors and the public alike. But in private, Riley heard very different whispers, fragments that didn't match the tidy narrative. Sometimes adults spoke in coded phrases, implying that Elvis had made a choice nobody was allowed to explain. At just 8 years old, Riley noticed the differences herself. Sitting in her grandmother Priscilla's living room, she heard the practiced, polished version of Elvis's death, smooth and solemn. Yet shortly after, she overheard her mother, Lisa Marie, on the phone, describing something far more complicated and mysterious. Lisa Marie's voice was quieter, tinged less with grief and more with resignation, as if she guarded a painful secret rather than simply mourning. These fragments didn't add up, leaving Riley puzzled and wary. Children often pick up on things adults expect them to miss. Riley caught on to contradictions, different versions of the truth told in different rooms, sudden silences when she entered, cryptic comments from relatives who seemed to know more than they said. Family gatherings were thick with unspoken tension. The official story was a mask, a shield against the reality her young mind struggled to grasp. The inconsistent accounts bred confusion and unease. Riley came to understand that her family's grief was wrapped in silence and secrecy, not open remembrance. Instead of sharing memories, they treated August 16th almost like a sacred, solemn holiday marked by quiet and careful distance. There were no photographs or stories passed around, nothing to anchor her memories with clarity. The day was something to survive, not celebrate or mourn openly. This secrecy wouldn't allow Riley the normal experiences children have when losing a loved one. Questions she asked were met with mixed emotions from her mother, an internal battle between protecting her daughter and the daughter's growing need for honesty. Riley was learning the challenging art of smiling for cameras while hiding her confusion and pain inside. This created a sense of existential vertigo. How could she trust a family that kept its real story locked away? Growing up, Riley realized that she was not just a granddaughter, but also a protector of a secret she barely understood. The truth about Elvis wasn't just about loss or tragedy. It was about survival at some profound cost. She knew the silence was deliberate, but the cost was her own sense of reality. This constant uncertainty made it hard to build trust, not just with the family, but within herself. Her experience was unlike the childhood of other kids who mourned grandparents in clear and shared ways. Riley's grandfather was different, somewhere between myth and man, between life and an unclear kind of absence. Everyone told different stories, yet none confirmed the whole truth. This ambiguity shaped her relationship with loyalty and secrecy in ways that would only become clear much later. The secret became a fragile weight Riley carried unknowingly, shaping how she saw the world and those around her. People could say one thing and mean another, leaving her with a damaged sense of perception and trust. Being raised in such a charged environment meant that a simple family story became a complex puzzle with pieces missing or concealed. These early experiences set the stage for a deeper journey, one that would eventually lead Riley to confront the truth head-on. She would have to decide whether to continue the silence or break it, and what that choice would mean for herself, her children, and the legacy of her family. As Riley navigated this painful uncertainty, the family's public image painted a very different picture. The family's carefully crafted narrative. Outwardly, the Presley family kept up this sort of consistent story, like a unified line meant to protect Elvis's image, and also shield the relatives from scandal and general confusion. On the surface, they looked like they were devastated by sudden loss, grieving openly but with dignity and some kind of calm acceptance. The official timeline sounded pretty simple and also rehearsed. Elvis died by himself in his bathroom, was discovered by his fiancée, and emergency services couldn't get him back. From the outside, the whole narrative looked pretty airtight. That polished version was the one that got shared on camera, in interviews, and then again through official statements. Photographers and journalists were met with this carefully staged face of sorrow and resolve. The family relied on similar phrases, matching emotional tones, and they kept pushing the idea that the tragedy was a closed chapter, and in a way it put order around something that had really shaken the world. So the public could grieve with them, search for closure, and then move on. However, behind closed doors, the whole mood was just different. Privately, the family's version of things unraveled into a bunch of competing, confusing tellings. Riley, still a younger member, would catch bits of talk she was not supposed to ever hear. The adults would stop mid-sentence or quickly redirect, like her entering the room was a switch. Even when the conversation sounded clinical, like autopsy results and timing, there was this clear tint of doubt and maybe suspicion. The account itself had layers that didn't really sit inside basic medical facts. Her grandmother, Priscilla's phrases, the ones she used again and again for outsiders, carried a practiced calm that somehow hid real unease. At one point, she told Riley, off to the side, that the timeline wasn't entirely clean. Still, she insisted it needed to be airtight to keep standing. That word alone suggested it wasn't just about saving face, more like guarding a secret, one of those that could pull the whole fabric apart. You could feel it, the public unity, almost like a staged display held up at a personal cost. And then there were the versions of Elvis's condition during his last days. Different relatives described him in different tones. Some said he was down, weighed by illness and strain. Others claimed he was clear-headed and somehow steady, even peaceful. Talk about substances kept bumping into insistence about sobriety, like two stories competing for the same space. Those contradictions weren't merely feelings either. They pointed toward a more tangled reality that outsiders weren't permitted to witness. This contrast between the public narrative and the private reality sort of created this impossible little space for Riley. While the world mourned a legendary figure that was lost too soon, her family still had to live with a secret that kind of bent how they looked at him, and also at themselves. The official story held up an image, but it also locked them all inside this brittle lie, like a prison that didn't need bars. For Riley, that fractured family story became one of those experiences that sticks. She learned early how to move through the fine line between public face and private truths. She took in lessons about loyalty and silence, and yes, protecting the people she loved even when it cost her her own ability to understand. Those contradictions weren't just weird details, they felt like signals that the story wasn't really done yet. As the hidden narrative layers kept piling up, Riley's own discoveries started to redraw the edge of what she thought was real. Small bits of evidence showed up, and they didn't just shake the official timeline, they questioned the whole nature of Elvis's existence after that tragic day. The family's protective narrative was just the beginning. The realities Riley uncovered would go beyond anything she expected, uncovering hidden evidence. Years after childhood, Riley gained access to parts of her family's history that had been locked away, rooms in Graceland forbidden to her before, filled with photographs, letters, and recordings that painted a completely different picture. What she found were images of her grandfather not as the public star frozen in 1977, but as a man who had lived quietly for decades beyond that date. These photographs showed Elvis aging naturally, away from the limelight, sometimes unrecognizable at first glance. One striking discovery was a photograph dated 1981, 4 years after Elvis's reported death, showing Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, standing with a man who looked unmistakably like an older Elvis. Both appeared peaceful and content in a way the public Elvis never had. When Riley showed the photo to her mother, Lisa Marie, the response was not denial, but a quiet admission that some things were better left unexplained. This moment offered a glimpse into the complicated layers of family secrecy. Beyond pictures, Riley found personal letters and journals in her mother's carefully preserved archives. These writings revealed Elvis's reflections on fame, faith, and the spiritual emptiness that had consumed him. He described the entertainment industry as a machine that chewed him up and spit him out, making disappearance the only way to reclaim his soul. One passage stood out: "I gave the world a king, but I needed to become a man." This was a phrase that reframed everything Riley thought she understood about her grandfather's fate. Perhaps most compelling was an audio recording, not professionally made but personal, of an older voice reading religious texts. The voice, unmistakably Elvis's but aged over decades, included a message for his family. It expressed no regret for the choice he made to disappear, only sorrow for the pain caused and a hope for peace. This recording was a profound piece of evidence validating what Riley had begun to believe. Medical records from small clinics in rural Tennessee and Arkansas further confirmed Elvis's hidden life. And these documents, spanning years after 1977, detailed treatments for conditions the public knew he had suffered from. These records were not from Memphis hospitals tied to his public life, but places that suggested a man living quietly, away from the world's watchful eyes. Conversations with relatives who had maintained contact with Elvis revealed a man deeply engaged with his family, offering wisdom and showing genuine interest in the lives of his grandchildren. These encounters were discreet but sincere, hinting at a relationship that transcended the public story. Through this growing collection of evidence, Riley began to reconstruct a grandfather she never truly knew, one who had made an impossible choice to leave behind the fame and tragedy and live a different kind of life. This man carried the consequences of that choice with dignity, becoming someone she could love and understand beyond the myth. These revelations also helped Riley understand why her mother had protected this secret with such fierce determination. It was not shame, but love that kept the truth locked away. The secret was a fragile shield guarding a peace that Elvis had fought to find. As the weight of these discoveries settled, Riley faced a profound decision about what it meant to carry this truth forward. The layers of family secrets and hidden truths formed a delicate web around Riley's life. But the journey to uncover the real story was just beginning. The weight of protecting secrets. Growing up, Riley Keough sensed that the burden of family secrets rested heavily on her mother, Lisa Marie Presley. Lisa Marie's role was complex. She was both a daughter mourning her father and a guardian sworn to keep the family's concealed truth safe. For decades, Lisa Marie carried this weight silently, protecting Riley from questions that might unravel the delicate balance kept by the family. It was a protection born not from shame, but from an understanding that some truths could cause deep harm if revealed too soon. This burden shaped Riley's childhood profoundly. She learned early how to mask her confusion with a practiced smile and to deflect questions from the media. Inside, however, she wrestled with fragments of conversations and inconsistencies too tangled for a child to untangle. Lisa Marie's conflicted expressions when Riley asked direct questions revealed the tightrope her mother walked, torn between honesty and the need to preserve what she believed was her father's greatest wish. Lisa Marie's silence was not simple avoidance. It was a lifelong sacrifice meant to guard peace within the family. Riley saw how her mother's refusal to speak freely created a gulf between them, a mixture of love and distance that persisted through the years. This unspoken promise shaped Riley's own views on loyalty, trust, and the cost of protecting those we love. It was a heavy inheritance passed down in silence. As Lisa Marie's health declined, that protective shell began to crack. Moments of vulnerability revealed glimpses of the real story, fragments that Riley had been kept from all her life. Lisa Marie started to hint at a truth that was both heartbreaking and awe-inspiring, a truth about a man who had escaped not to deceive, but to survive and reclaim himself. These moments reshaped everything Riley believed about her family and herself. The realization settled that Lisa Marie's lifelong secrecy was a form of love, a shield meant to protect Riley and the family from unbearable pain. It was a secret Lisa Marie did not choose lightly, but one she accepted as her burden. This awareness deepened Riley's understanding of her mother's struggles and the complex choices made in the name of family preservation. Riley's own position shifted from that of a protected child to a woman grappling with the legacy of silence. As she became a mother herself, questions from her own children ignited a new urgency to confront the truth. The shadows Lisa Marie had guarded so fiercely were growing darker, and Riley recognized that the next generation deserved clarity rather than inherited mysteries. The secrecy had twisted Riley's sense of reality over the years. It affected her ability to trust her own perceptions and shaped how she saw relationships, loyalty, and identity. The protective lies she'd grown up with now felt like barriers to genuine connection, not only with family, but within her own sense of self. Despite the pain, Riley also recognized the depth of the love behind these secrets. It was not a betrayal, but a shield forged under overwhelming circumstances. Understanding this gave her the courage to face the complicated history honestly and with compassion. Carrying the weight of these guarded truths, Riley stood at a crossroads. Would she continue the silence that had defined her childhood, or would she break free and face the consequences that honesty would bring? The answer was becoming clearer with every passing day. The mysteries surrounding her grandfather's death were only part of the story. There were more questions waiting in the shadows, especially about those closest to Elvis himself. The mysterious fate of Vernon Presley. Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, was a steady figure in the family, present through the rise and fall of an empire and deeply involved in managing his son's business affairs. Vernon died in 1979, just 2 years after Elvis's reported death. Publicly, his passing was accepted as part of the family's ongoing tragedy, noted as significant, yet not shocking. But the circumstances surrounding Vernon's death left Riley with lingering doubts. When Riley looked closer, some things didn't add up. Photographs from 1978 showed Vernon healthy and active, managing business and attending family events. Then, suddenly, he was gone. There was no public record of a prolonged illness or a decline. He simply wasn't there anymore. This abrupt disappearance raised questions that puzzled Riley for years. Digging deeper, Riley discovered an extraordinary photograph dated 1981, 2 years after Vernon's reported death. The image showed Vernon standing beside a man who looked remarkably like an older Elvis Presley. Both appeared calm, smiling quietly as if reunited in a moment of peace. A photograph like this should not have existed. It contradicted everything the public believed about the Presley family timeline. When Riley confronted her mother with the photo, the response was a long, uncomfortable silence, followed by a cryptic, "Some things are better left unexplained, sweetheart." This was not a denial or a dismissal. It was an acknowledgement that the truth was more complicated, a family secret, layered and protected for reasons Riley was only beginning to understand. This revelation opened the door to a new perspective, that the Presley family wasn't just hiding a single secret, but managing multiple realities simultaneously. Different family members knew different versions of the truth. Some had accepted it, others still struggled with it, and still more agreed Riley was not yet ready to hear everything. Vernon's fate became a symbol of this compartmentalized truth, a man officially dead but photographed alive, sharing space with a figure thought to be gone forever. This gap between public knowledge and private reality underscored the extent to which the family's silence was a protective but fragile construction. Riley also came to understand that the family's silence was a deliberate choice, made at great personal cost. It prioritized survival over transparency, allowing some semblance of normality while burying deeper truths that might have fractured them permanently. Vernon's story was part of that balance. an enigmatic piece that hinted at a hidden family history. These discoveries shifted Riley's role from observer to active participant in uncovering the truth. The enigma of Vernon Presley was not just about the past. It questioned the entire narrative the family had carried for decades. As Riley faced the complexity of Vernon's story, she prepared to journey even further into the secret that had shaped her life. The burden of silence and the mystery surrounding Vernon were only pieces of a larger puzzle, setting the stage for Riley's personal struggle with identity and truth. Riley's personal struggle with truth and identity. Growing up surrounded by confusion and half-truths, Riley Keough had this steady kind of trouble with who she really was. The puzzles in her family's history weren't only secrets, they were like questions about what kind of person she actually was and where she was meant to fit. When the base of your family's story is cracked, or sometimes kept hidden on purpose, it kind of messes with your inner compass in a way that's hard to put into words. Riley kept getting stuck between that inherited loyalty and a need for something clearer, like answers she couldn't yet name. And all of it carried the heaviness of promises made before she could even grasp them. She figured out early that things could look one way while meaning another. The people around her would often say one thing, but they'd intend something else. So the boundary between truth and falsehood started to blur. That slow corrosion of trust didn't stay inside the family either. It spilled outward into friendships, into relationships beyond the Presley circle. Riley became cautious about what was spoken and what was carefully withheld. That made it harder for her to reach people in a real, grounded way. Every interaction felt shadowed by the quiet awareness that her whole reality was built in layers, with these unseen barriers. The lessons about loyalty Riley received were kinda contradictory. She was told to protect family secrets fiercely, but then it also became clear, really clear, that a lot of the family's foundation had been stitched together using selective truths and long stretches of silence. So it put this pressure inside her, a loyalty that felt both sacred and suffocating. The whole thing caused a sort of emotional vertigo as she tried to sort out how to honor her heritage without getting swallowed by its distortions. Growing up with that stubborn lack of transparency, Riley's trust in her own sense of things was constantly challenged. There was gaslighting too, intentional or not, from people who were supposed to be her safest place, and it left her wondering what was real and what was a protective invention. That back and forth messed with how she understood her memories and her feelings. It was heavy, like a burden you don't set down, a childhood built from tiny fragments, while she still sensed the full picture was being deliberately hidden. Even with all that emotional cost, Riley didn't move through it with bitterness. Instead, she met it with a determined empathy. She learned that the silence wasn't only cruelty, it was more like a complicated kind of love, meant to keep her from certain pain. Truth became this complicated companion, so later on, when she had to face the family legacy, she was calmer, more patient, and more reflective than she might have been otherwise. Honestly, as an adult and also a mother herself, Riley's view changed in a big way. Like, the very secrets she'd been taught to guard, all those little locks, started to look more like barriers than anything, to the kind of openly tuned relationships she wanted with her kids. That inner shift is what kind of set Riley up to handle the weight her mother and grandparents had carried. She could see it clearly then. Silence cost something, and the bill was too high to hand down again. The family story felt fragile, like it might crack if it kept being pressed in the wrong way. And the need for clearer words and honesty started to feel urgent, not optional. And Riley's own struggle wasn't just about digging up family history. It was about getting her own voice back inside that history. The tricky part, the main conflict, was figuring out how to stay loyal and still be truthful without turning herself into a closed room. The road there was risky for sure, but it also held the possibility of healing. The journey toward breaking the silence was as much about identity as it was about revelation. It demanded courage and a willingness to face consequences, both known and unknown. Questions from her children would soon push Riley closer to the moment of decision. Breaking the silence. The moment when Riley Keough faced the choice to speak openly about her family's truth did not arrive suddenly. It was a gradual realization that silence had become a heavier burden than disclosure. As her own children grew older, their innocent questions about the family name and its history peeled back the protective layers Riley's mother had worked so hard to maintain. The familiar stories they had been told no longer held, and the cracks in the family narrative were impossible to ignore. One pivotal moment came when her daughter asked, simply and directly, if Grandpa Elvis really died the way everyone said. This question, spoken with childlike innocence, shook Riley deeply. It was a signal that the carefully maintained veil was thinning and that the truth was seeking release through the next generation. Riley understood that maintaining silence was no longer sustainable or fair to her children. At the same time, the world around Riley had changed. In an era of rapid technological advances, facial recognition, DNA databases, and genealogy websites, secrets hidden for decades faced exposure in ways impossible before. The very tools the family once relied on to protect their privacy had transformed into instruments that could confirm or deny long-guarded mysteries. Within the family, too, changes were unfolding. Older relatives who had carried the secret were beginning to waver. Some cousins and aunts were starting to speak in hints or vague admissions. A collective exhaustion was settling over those who had shielded the truth for so long. The original plan, set in motion decades ago, was losing its hold as its architects passed away or grew weary. Riley grappled with the fear that the truth might emerge unexpectedly, without context or control. Uncontrolled revelations could cause chaos, misunderstanding, and pain. She feared the consequences of leaks, whispers, and speculation, but recognized that silence was no longer protective. It was a source of division and confusion. This mounting pressure intensified Riley's resolve. She understood she was the bridge between a past wrapped in shadows and a future needing honesty. The decision to break silence was not about sensationalism or attention. It was a moral responsibility born of love for her grandfather, her mother, and her own children. Riley had also discovered instructions left behind, subtle yet clear hints in journals and letters from Elvis himself that anticipated this moment. He seemed to understand that the truth could not remain hidden forever, and that one day, scientific advancements would make proof possible. His hope was that truth would come at the right time, with the family ready to bear it. The act of breaking silence was a profound leap into the unknown, driven by the desire to honor her family's real story, rather than the one publicly told. It was a choice to embrace complexity and vulnerability over comfort and concealment. This marked the beginning of a new chapter, one where secrets began to give way to clarity, and where Riley stepped forward as both guardian and storyteller of her family's deepest truths. A legacy reclaimed. Riley Keough now stands at the center of a Presley legacy shaped by fame, secrecy, and painful family history. As the bridge between the past and the next generation, she believes preserving that legacy requires more than protecting old promises. It means confronting difficult truths with honesty and compassion. Her decision to speak openly is driven partly by her children. Riley does not want them to inherit a family story built on secrecy and half-truths. Instead, she wants them to understand their history in a way that feels real, human, and complete. Advances in technology have also changed what can remain hidden. Voice analysis, facial recognition, genealogy databases, and the examination of letters, photographs, medical records, and recordings have made it increasingly difficult for long-held family mysteries to remain unquestioned. Riley understands that challenging an established narrative invites skepticism and criticism. Still, she sees openness as a possible path toward healing. Rather than sensationalizing Elvis Presley, her goal is to present him as a complicated human being whose life carried enormous pressures beyond his public image. Her mother, Lisa Marie Presley, also lived under the weight of protecting the family's private history. Riley now faces the responsibility of deciding what should remain private and what deserves to be understood. Ultimately, Riley's journey represents a shift from silence toward openness. By approaching her family's past with compassion, she hopes to create a Presley legacy defined not only by fame and tragedy, but also by humanity, understanding, and reconciliation. Elvis Presley's family story is no longer just a guarded secret. Riley Keough's brave choice to reveal the truth shows us the power of honesty to heal old wounds. If you found this story moving, please like and subscribe to join us as we continue exploring the untold histories behind public legends.